where each week we drink fancy wine and watch popular movies that are in some way culturally significant. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Sarah. And thank you for listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. This is episode 3.
We're watching on YouTube.
Oh, and everybody watching on YouTube.
All right, podcast business.
Yes. So first we want to say thank you to anybody that's actually watching, that's dealing with all of our out of focus footage or slightly weird audio. I think we have it actually fixed now.
Some slight speed bumps, learning pains, you know.
Mm-hmm. We're taking it one day at a time. This is episode 3. Hopefully 3 will be better than 2, which was not really better than 1 as far as technical video audio, but I think we're in a better place now.
Yep. We also want to go back to my question from last week, the hot seat of which famous couple would we be if we were going to the prom and never been kissed and had to have the theme of meant for each other. And after like a week of racking our brains.
I'm gonna be honest, I really all week kept trying to go back to it and nothing came to mind. I had nothing.
I was like historical things or like.
I think that's what was the historical. I was like, someone from history, I don't know.
But just as famous couples from history doesn't mean they were actually real. So I vote that we say our answer is Jim and Pam from The Office, because I think that mostly fits like our vibe, and anything else I think would have just been awkward, and we would have just said we're not going to this dance.
And like, not saying we are this like superstar perfect couple, like I mean Jim and Pam aren't perfect either, but they're put on this like pedestal of being wonderful. But I think they're just kind of average people working at an average paper company, and they have kids and just very like normal people. They're friends. I consider you my best friend, so just
end up with having two girls.
No, they have a boy and a girl.
A boy and a girl. Okay. Well,
not quite the same as us.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So, but that question did plague me all week. I was really stressed about it, but it was a good one. It was a good question, and it was very fitting for the podcast. But
so, what are we drinking tonight?
Tonight we are switching it up from our Zinfandels from the last 2 weeks. We are drinking the 2013 Tobin James Gang Reserve Primitivo from I said 2013, but 2013 was 10 years ago.
Yikes. I hope this has aged well and not gone bad, but if it has, then it'll at least make interesting content, right? But I'm excited to change it up. I feel like I've had some Primitivos before. I can't really say too much about them, but it just kind of sounds like a fancy thing. For some reason, I just associate it with like, that sounds like something I'd have with a steak. I don't know. It just sounds...
Sure, I'll start going with that now. I also feel like the 2013 vintage makes it like, oh, we're really culturing ourselves. We're drinking a 10-year-old wine. Like, I feel really classy. Yeah. So I hope it tastes good.
You were still in college. Not really getting too much in the nose, almost.
Yeah, it's not very fragrant.
Yeah. And then, of course, I'd have, like, I can't smell anything right now after 3 big whiffs of that. Let's see.
Yeah, just kind of has, like, a sharp alcohol smell, but...
I almost get like some bubble gum right away. Like raspberry.
It has a sweetness. It's no crazy flavors really jump out to me. It's not. It's good, but it's not like, oh, I get this spicy, earthy. It's just kind of grapey to me.
I don't know. I got raspberry, and then I almost got like some iced tea. Like not sweet tea, but
I know. I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
I'm not a big tea person, so that doesn't usually jump out to me. But I guess I can see that too. Like when I first take a sip, it tastes just like grape juice, like Welch's grape juice.
Yeah,
and then the wine flavor kicks in.
Yeah, I get that not
the candy, sugary grape flavor.
Grape, yeah, definitely get that too.
Yeah. All right. So. We'll see how we feel after we drink a whole bottle of it, but so far, it's pretty good. All right, what are we watching tonight?
Risky Business from 1983. So, have you seen it before?
Jump right into the question instead of talking about it. I have not seen it before.
I have one time, but it was probably honestly back when this wine was made. It's probably been about 10 years. And I remember...
Yeah, what do you know about the movie?
Yeah, what do I know about this movie? Obviously, it's got Tom Cruise in it, and it's got that like iconic scene of like the underwear and.
Those are the 2 things I know.
Yeah,
I almost made us dress up.
Yeah.
I almost was like, let's put on boxers and the button-down shirt and our Ray-Bans and watch this in costume.
Yeah, I feel like there's like some partying like that goes on, but like that's probably true about every movie, so it's not really super specific.
I assume they get into some risky business.
Yeah.
That would be my
So honestly, like I can't remember most of the core thing about this movie other than I know that I have seen it.
This will be interesting because this is the first one, like for the first two, neither of us had seen either movie. So this will be the first one where you've at least seen it. And I wonder, especially with knowing how your memory works, like as soon as the movie starts, is it all going to come back to you or?
That's what I was just going to say. Like it's weird because I usually remember like everything about all the movies that I've seen. But this time I have like a couple little snapshots in my mind, but I don't really have it all together. But I think once it starts, I'll probably remember a lot of it, but I'll try not to like give any spoilers, obviously.
No, please don't.
So I'm excited to rewatch it, and
I'm very excited. I feel like again, like The Graduate, you hear about a lot. I feel like this scene is parodied and referenced a lot. That to see what sets that up is going to be really.
I get the feeling this one is going to be kind of like the Mrs. Robinson. We're going to see this one referenced a lot more often going forward in these movies, especially as we're working through like the 80s, 90s, and all that sort of stuff. I think we're going to see a lot of
callbacks.
Yeah, callbacks to this.
Yeah, I'm excited. We've also decided we're going to start a counter for every time any of the movies we watched is referenced in a future movie. So far we're at 1. Mrs. Robinson was mentioned in, or The Graduate was mentioned in Never Been Kissed. So we've been cultured one time.
Yeah, we're not going to get any callbacks to Never Been Kissed in this one because that took place after that. But we might get a Mrs. Robinson in this.
Honestly, I'm kind of expecting it.
Yeah.
So
fingers crossed.
Yeah, we'll see. Ready for Ep 3?
Let's dive in.
Let's get risky.
All right, risky business.
I don't even know.
That well, we'll get to it in a little bit, but that wasn't quite what I remembered. It was
honestly, that's really nice for me to hear that you don't remember every single second of that movie.
Yeah,
that was kind of a surprise for you.
Yeah, that was a wild ride.
All right, start with the wine.
Yeah,
rating out of 10.
You wanna go first?
Sure, I'll go first. I'm trying to remember because like the whole time we're watching, I was thinking about it.
The Black Box, not a sponsor, but could be if you want to be.
To the after show wine. I think I wanted to say 5.8. I think was my wine score.
Interesting, because I had it at a 7.8.
What?
I thought it was better.
7.8?
I thought it was, so I liked the
last
fact
week
that,
was like a 5?
Yeah, like this, it wasn't like too super alcohol forward. It felt kind of like light, not too heavy. Had a lot of good like, flavors on there with like the raspberry, the fruitiness of it, the bubblegum flavor. I actually kind of liked it. I liked it. It made me happy.
I'm not saying it was a bad wine. I thought it was fine. But to me, like, I think I also have your scale in your head from last week where, how are we rating it from like, trash water to the best wine we've ever had, or like really good or like decent wine to like pretty good wine. And it was, I don't know that it will really stand out to me as something I really remember. And I liked it. I enjoyed it.
It's not
it was
8.
Fine.
It was a wine that I very much enjoyed, and it was better than a lot of wines that I've had, and I liked it.
Everybody is allowed to have their own tastes. I liked last week's wine better than this week's wine.
I like this one better than the previous weeks. I just, there's no objective measurement in there. That was just the number that
stuck out to you. All right.
So I liked the Primitivo 2012. I doubt you can 2013. I doubt you can buy that anymore. But
I know.
In case you are in the market for a Primitivo, the 2013 James K Reserve
was great.
Was a good one.
Yeah, I mean, I did like it. I liked last week's better.
Do wines, like, once they reach like a certain like milestone, do they become like, like with cars, once you reach the 25-year age, it's like you get the antique plates. Like, is there special like benchmark once you reach?
Did we drink antique wine?
Yeah, like is this now like a much more sought after? I guess definitely gonna get more rare over time, but I just wonder if there's any sort of like a 10-year, 15-year, 20-year wine, whatever. But yeah, it was good.
Yeah, I mean, I did like it. I just liked last week's better.
So I guess next is what movie out of 10?
I'll let you go first.
I'll go first on this one. I'm gonna say 6.7.
I was 6.3. I was really hoping it would be the same.
Yeah, it was decent.
I guess according to this screen that's up here, it has a 6.6 star rating. Yeah. So we were kind of right on those.
I honestly did not look at either of those. Interesting, it's at a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes, but I wonder how much of that is just because like of name recognition. Mm-hmm. I thought it started out kind of fast, and then all of a sudden it got real slow.
I feel like it was fine. It was not at all what I thought it was going to be. Mm-hmm. I know that's a later question.
Makes sense,
we'll get to more of the
branding
specifics.
now from the title there with like the real like red font and the.
But I think like it seemed like someone came up with the idea for it, all in one sitting, and was like, "Okay, now film it, go." And they didn't take the time to fully wrap.
I was gonna say
connect everything together.
It felt like it was like thought up by like just like a horny teenager.
Yeah.
It very much had that like everything about it. So I guess what next is
we can dive more into the questions, but
yeah, I think next is a plot synopsis. I'll give my synopsis, then you can pull up Wikipedia definition.
Wikipedia while you're.
So yeah, Tom Cruise's character Joel has his parents' house for the weekend, which I feel like was a super cliche like storyline for so many things. But rather than just being like, oh, we're having a big, huge party, everyone's gonna get drunk and things are gonna get wrecked, we gotta build it back up. It was more like, hey, I'm gonna hire a prostitute, and then I'm gonna suddenly become like a pimp because I have to save her, and then I wreck my dad's car, and then in one night I have to make a whole lot of money have this huge overnight prostitution ring to make thousands and thousands of dollars. But also, since I screwed over a previous pimp, he's going to come and steal all my furniture and not like, I don't know, like shoot me or like break my knees or something. He steals all the furniture, then he has to then buy back and then gets back just in the nick of time to beat his parents back from the airport, from their trip, whatever, and doesn't get caught. But then the mom walks in, the tiniest little like scratch in this crystal vase or
it's an egg. It is a crystal egg.
Yeah, the college football trophy looking thing.
0% at my home.
Yeah, then he gets into Princeton in the end. That's
so when you get into risky business, you'll get into Princeton. I might have to kind of skim through this plot because it's not super concise, but
what's the like first paragraph synopsis?
Well, the first paragraph: high achieving high school student Joel Goodston. High achieving?
Yeah.
We can dive into that in a second.
We'll get that.
Lives with his wealthy parents. Obviously, he's in high school. In the Chicago North Shore area of Glencoe, his father wants him to attend Princeton University, his alma mater. So Joel participates in future enterprisers, an extracurricular activity in which students work in teams to create small businesses. While Joel's parents go away on a trip, his friend Miles convinces him to use his newfound freedom to have some fun. On the first night, Joel raids the liquor cabinet, plays the stereo loudly, joyrides in his father's car, and dances around the living room in his briefs and button-down shirt to old-time rock and roll. That's the first two paragraphs of the Wikipedia summary.
But that makes the Wikipedia summary. I don't know if it was there like something at the top here. That's more notes. I guess that was not really a good summary. Yeah. I think I gave a better summary than we're not going to read the whole like 5 paragraphs of that. So was the movie what you expected?
Absolutely not.
Both say no, even though I had seen it before.
Prostitution? Mm-hmm. See, I would have never said that. I mean, he is so unlike last week where Drew Barrymore was not an actual high schooler. Mm-hmm. He was actually in high school, which fits along kind of with what I assumed. Mm-hmm. You know, I assumed it was about a high school or like a teenager who gets some kind of freedom and takes advantage of it, which, yes, that happened. Prostitution was not ever something I would have imagined.
Yeah, that's why I was like, I'm pretty sure there was like a big party, and there was, but it was just a prostitution ring like party thing.
But even like, I mean, that party at the end was just absolutely not on my radar. But even at the beginning, when it was like, oh, like call girl, like all the news, his friend was reading off all the newspaper ads, and I was like, are you actually gonna have someone come to your house and like do all this? And then she comes over and it wasn't actually a dream. Like totally thought that was a dream.
Well, even back up from that though, the first prostitution call is just like picks up a number, calls it, gives like a quick like hush.
Well,
like,
his friend like doesn't.
He's like, hey, my name's Joel at this address. I'm looking for a good time tonight. Bye, and hangs up. No like follow up, no question asked, no anything. All of a sudden, a taxi arrives, and like I feel like. Why would you just like trust that? Like I feel like if I were a prostitute, would have wanted to know that, like, this was like a legitimate call. This wasn't like a trap. This wasn't someone like who was just a high schooler dicking around where I wasted my night going all the way out there, or it wasn't like someone who's like, I'm gonna call a prostitute and then, like, you know, take advantage of them or beat them or something. Like, seemed really kind of sketchy. Like, no way that would have actually happened.
I think a lot of this movie for me was, again, viewing with my 2020s lens, was like, I don't think a lot of this would happen, or people, I mean, even the prostitution side would be a lot more conscious of who they were going to call on, just like with the catfishing and the people being like, oh yeah, come to my house. Like, I think there would be a lot more of like a screening process.
Could this be made today / how would it be made today? I mean, I think you're right with like all the prostitution. I think that it was kind of sketchy that it was just in the newspaper. I don't know if that was just more of a thing then, or if I don't read the newspaper, that's like still a thing.
This was like made almost 10 years before.
So much of that seems like the whole like, you know, chat room, like soliciting sex from people, like being catfished, or just being like a cop on the other end. I feel like that would have been so much less likely to have like happened that way.
I mean, even like the ad that they read, or one of the ads they read, we were joking about how, oh, that's like one of the weird spam, like Instagram, like DMs you get every once in a while, or like Snapchat or whatever.
Yeah. Text me back on sex.
Yeah.
On Snapchat, all those weird,
all these
sketchy things.
Very, very spammy things that you get from time to time, that the fact that was in the newspaper and that was something that was actually put out there, and I'm sure that was that, you know, going into the newspaper for that was where you had to go, because there was no internet, there was no social media or anything.
The newspaper seems like less likely. I feel like you would have, I don't know, posted bulletin somewhere or something. I feel like
I don't know, the 80s were a different time.
Will the newspaper have been like, yes, we have a department where we just host a bunch of prostitution ads that are clearly like escorts, or I guess escort services are still above the line somehow in some places, but
yeah.
I
don't pretend to know anything about
on that line. I was like, I wonder how this movie would be viewed if, like, in the next decade or two, like, prostitution is legalized. What this would kind of look like. It seems like so much of this is based on the fact that this is like a risky business and it's not legal and it's all that whatever. That I think that would totally change the tone of this movie, or how you would look back on it, being like, this was.
But also the attitude of the characters in the movie is, he doesn't seem concerned at all that he's running a prostitution ring out of his parents' home while they're out of town.
Yeah.
And I just feel like the way his character is set up to be is he's kind of cautious, or apparently according to Wikipedia, he's this high achieving student. That I think you'd be a little bit more
The dad was so worried about whether, like, how he was pushing the equalizer on his stereo. And suddenly this guy's like okay with having not just like one prostitute, but like 50 at his house unattended, and then goes off on a train somewhere. And
inviting his high school friends into his home to hook up with these women. And some of them looked like they were 12.
Yeah.
So...
And he's like, yes, surely this will never like come back to me, and I will never get caught on this, or no, the neighbors won't say anything in this. If you're like in a super like ritzy neighborhood like that, you probably have like something of like a nosy neighbor, neighborhood watch. Someone's going to have, you know, noticed this and been like, I'm going to go ahead and call the parents and say, did you know that you're having a party or a bunch of prostitutes at the house?
Oh yeah, the nosy,
in that kind of neighborhood,
busybody,
especially.
like stay-at-home mom that knows like his mom would absolutely be all over that. Yeah.
But how well did it age? I think, kind of going back to that part of it, I think it aged fairly well. It didn't seem too, like, a lot of the things that, you know, parents going out of town and them calling to check in, like, you could clearly, you know, just, it'd be easier to, you know, your parents check in to call on a cell phone no matter where you are, or you could send a whole bunch of, like, you know, pictures of you at the house, and like it would be easy to act like everything's fine.
It wasn't too dependent on technology.
I think parents are less likely to leave their kids for a week, like even in high school. To just
the helicopter parents are always want to be with their kids. Yeah. I also just feel like, I mean, we don't have boys, and I was not a teenage boy ever. I don't know how much I would trust my teenage boy, my high school senior teenage boy at home alone.
Yeah, I mean, now you'd have like security cameras. You'd be telling the neighbors to call. You would have like smart sensors on your doors to know who's coming in and out and all that. But next question is, did they say the title of the movie in the movie? I don't think they did. But does the title fit the movie? I think it does.
Very
appropriate. I don't know what else I would have
didn't give it.
with.
I mean, I don't think it really gave away what it was. Like you said, actually looking at the graphic design look of the title, having seen it, I can see how it fits, especially with the like red, like neon sign looking.
The branding of it, the sign of it would fit very well. I wonder what other titles were like considered for it. Like,
but now that you say it, like I'm really shocked that, especially in 1983, it was not like we're gonna get into some risky business or some very cheesy. Let's throw that line in there to make it.
Well, it's like all this, I feel like would have been so scandalous at the time, but all we ever hear about is Tom Cruise running around in his underwear, which was like literally 3 seconds in the beginning.
I was not prepared for it to be in the first second. I think my exact quote was, already? Are we really getting into this right now?
Yeah, so let's go through the last 2 questions and then we'll get to all of our notes on that.
Get more nitty gritty.
Were there any actors that went on to do bigger things? Obviously Tom Cruise went on to do a lot of stuff. But the guy that was the pimp, he was in The Matrix, he was in Memento, and I don't think we've seen either of those. That was the only real one that I think went on to a lot of bigger things.
I didn't recognize anybody. I mean, it was kind of like a complete opposite of last week, where I felt like every time a new actor last week came on screen, it was like, oh man, I know you, and this week it was a bunch of nobodies to me. I'm not super cultured in the film world,
if there were any that I missed, it's,
no one really stood out to me.
Just didn't recognize them, I guess, but I didn't really see any. And then, do you feel cultured after watching it?
Yes.
Yeah, I would say yeah, much more in the Graduate like sense. Like I feel a lot more cultured of like I can say I've seen that scene at least, and I can talk more about the movie than just that.
Yeah, I got a lot of culture out of this, and I think similarly along the lines of The Graduate, I feel like, especially in 2020, that we seem like we're so much more aware of things and so much more accepting of like behaviors and different things like that, The Graduate and this seems so scandalous to me that like these came out in that, like The Graduate came out in the 60s, this came out in the 80s, that I don't know how these were perceived by the everyday people of the 80s, that I feel like this would have been so shocking.
And I feel like they're so scandalous for like what I imagine of those times, but what people talk about the movies about and remember them for seems like they just brushed it under the rug, and like I guess like no one wanted to acknowledge all that. They're like, oh, this movie, it's great because it was Tom Cruise in underwear, not like, and there was this whole like prostitution vibe, so much nudity, so much
just completely wipe or like sweeping that under the rug. That I don't know, that it makes me go into any future movie being way more cautious especially after these two that are like The Graduate and this one were really big name movies that keep being referenced all the time, that now I feel like I'm gonna start going into these movies a little more cautious of what I really think
am I gonna see
are.
This one didn't have quite the wild ending that The Graduate did, but
did not.
It was a bit more in your face, more like throughout the middle of it, of like this is kind of wild.
Okay, we're just going straight.
But I think with both of them though, like with The Graduate, we were surprised with the whole Mrs. Robinson seducing thing being so early, and likewise with this one, that the big Tom Cruise in the underwear scene was like very much in the beginning and not like
so maybe
in his like rise.
Everybody just stopped watching it in the first 20 minutes, and then the rest of all these other movies have just been completely forgotten.
So
go through your thoughts first.
I guess first of all, Tom Cruise was a complete infant in this.
I looked it up. He was probably like 2021 when it was filmed and when it came out.
He looked like a complete baby. Especially, I feel like some of the scenes looked they were filmed earlier on in production than others, where some of them he looked very, very young, and then others he looked like he was trying to be more of a mature kind of guy. But it was wild seeing him so young.
And I mean, obviously shocking to see him that young, because I feel like obviously this movie came out a long time before we were even born, so he was much older by the time that we were conscious of who he was. But also, I hear so much about this movie, and it's like Tom Cruise in his underwear and the glasses and all that kind of stuff is what you hear of this. But he was way much more of a nerdy character than I was expecting. I was not expecting that at all. Yeah,
I want to honestly see, because some of those he had like a bunch of like not crooked teeth, but like very much like kid looking teeth. I want to look now and see if he has just like straight veneers, or if that was like
I did notice his teeth.
Yeah. And also there were a bunch of scenes where he was standing with someone and you could see his entire body, and he didn't look, I don't know if they just hired a bunch of like much shorter people, but I feel like it's such a common thing now where it's like, oh, Tom Cruise is so short, they always have all these crazy things to make him look taller. And I feel like some of the camera scenes were filmed in a way to make everyone else look taller, but in other ones he was like 3 inches taller than his friend. Did they hire a really short guy so that he would feel fine?
How tall is he actually?
Was not expecting all the boobs so early.
He's 5'7".
Yeah.
I mean, I always look it up and feel shocked, but man, that's not that's like an inch and a half, 2 inches taller than me.
Yeah, short guy.
Yikes.
I like how he poured himself just a whole glass of scotch in the beginning when his parents went out of town. There's just like all this scotch and then like a tiny bit of
it's like how you
Coke.
make your mimosas.
Yeah.
A whole bunch of champagne with just a drop of orange juice.
But like a scotch and Coke, is that even a thing? Sounds terrible.
But it feels like a very 18-year-old thing. It's like, I'm going to take something and I'm going to pour a whole bunch of it and then I'm going to put a little bit of Coke on top.
I wish they'd shown him like drinking that, because the next thing you see is he's trying to eat like a frozen meal and he just bites right into like a frozen steak. And
He eats it like a popsicle.
And I'm like, why would you even do that? It just seems stupid. Yeah. The underwear scene was incredibly early in the movie. But also, why is he just running around in like his underwear? His parents are out of town, no one's there, but like, I feel like my idea of being like, I'm gonna take advantage of no one being here is I'm just gonna wear like cozy clothes. Like what Becky and Chris would call their tuxedos. Just like, I'm gonna go in my sweats and I'm just gonna be totally comfortable. I think I'd feel very uncomfortable just walking around, sitting around in my underwear, even just by myself. Just seems impractical.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like it's slightly different as a girl. Like if you're wearing like an oversized button down, that like, it can be more like a dress, nightgown, as opposed to just, I'm wearing one of my shirts with my underwear. I don't know. But I agree that I don't know that my first thought if I was home alone in my house would be like, oh, let me just take my pants off and not wear.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'd be self-conscious of being like, oh my God, I'm like slipping out, or is like, am I getting like a little bit of swamp ass and now it's just like everywhere. I would want at least some sort of buffer there, some sort of barrier. Just seems impractical if you're trying to relax.
I agree.
Why don't they have desks? But that was when they were in school. I thought they were in school, but that was their after school club thing. So it makes a tiny bit more sense, but still seems impractical. I like how they were riding around with the Porsche when the parents went out of town, just like running up to people and like revving the engine and driving away. And I very much imagine that nowadays what people do is they just like have like a superposed like Instagram post that they post, and like they're trying to act like they're really cool or cooler than they are.
With a lot of outtakes of like, oh no, I need to put my arm like this, or let me just
slouch like editing or get the lighting right or get the ankle right to make themselves look cool. I feel like that's the modern day version of them running around with muscle cars flexing.
And I mean, we definitely had some social media at that age, but I feel like what it is now is got to be completely different. That we have absolutely no clue of how exactly, like how much goes into the thought of like those kinds of posts. But that's definitely the flex is like, oh, let me post probably more to TikTok.
Yeah.
Instagram is so
we don't understand
so old fashioned these days.
Social media. Do you want to go through some of your notes, or you want me to go through all mine first?
You can keep going.
Okay.
You have a lot more notes than me. Mine are more like bigger picture.
I have, would she really just show up when it clearly sounded like a high schooler messing around on the phone, which we talked about before, about like, just seems unlikely. It seems like a trap. If I was like someone in that business, I'd be a little more skeptical, or have sent someone ahead of time, or have like some sort of protector with me to just be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go show up here, knock on the door, and...
Are you talking about Lana or Jackie?
Jackie.
Yeah. And especially
technically
because,
both, but like definitely
both
Jackie.
of them for sure. And especially because I feel like Lana kind of makes some like references to them being similar in age. That, I mean, if I was that young, I would not want to go anywhere alone.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe I would feel safer in this like nicer neighborhood, but also who even knows? You don't even know what you're getting. You never feel safe. I can't even imagine. But like you said, I mean, it was just this very much like you could tell he was laughing and he was kind of like, oh, my name's Joel, I'm in my house, like it hangs up.
Yeah, I think so many of those people that post their ads in the newspaper would have gotten so many prank calls all the time from that to have not just shown up.
And she even said like I can't. It was like a really far taxi ride or whatever. That I mean, if you're close by, it's one thing. I don't even pretend to know what that life is like. But I mean, if you're commuting. You're not just gonna go far away, whatever that is supposed to be, for a quick, like kind of jokey sounding. I don't know. I don't even pretend to know, but
just didn't seem very practical or believable there. The fact that when Lana did show up, that it wasn't a dream where like she shows up, he was like asleep, didn't answer the doorbell, she just lets herself in. Also, like who would have done that? and then comes in.
And they just go straight
into it. The door blows open and leaves just like. I don't get it. Was he gonna be just napping there and like the leaves just, or was the doors gonna blow open anyways? It just seems very, very weird, like to have had that happen, and then there's no mention of like this huge mess that would have happened.
He seemed very confident for like an 18-year-old high schooler who I assume was kind of new to this.
Yeah, they banged like 8 rooms for like half the night. He would have lasted like a quarter of a second.
And he just goes right into like rubbing his hand very slowly up her leg, and I'm like, no high schooler is composed enough.
Which is why I feel like this was made by like, or at least imagined by like a high schooler, like super horny guy who like had no actual experiences like this to be like, oh man, wouldn't it be great if I was in high school and like got a prostitute and she was so hot, she just like came to my house and like we banged in every room, and I'm like, this doesn't seem very believable in any sense of any sense of it. I thought that Lana had a lot of Taylor Swift looking vibes.
I did think that as well.
I couldn't put my finger on it for a while, but then,
oh no, I was right away.
Yeah. And then again, did anybody wear pants? Because then she's just hanging around his house, just walking around in her underwear all day, and just to me it seems.
I mean, I think the girl being no pants is more believable than the guy being no pants. And because you think it's weird, and I think it's less weird. Not that I walk around no pants often, but I have worn oversized like shirts or t-shirts and just like walked around to like get ready or I mean, especially before we had children and there were other people walking around the house when it was like just me hanging out in the morning.
But then like when he's studying just in his like study jorts just all the time.
The study jorts were weird. I will give you that. But they weren't only study jorts, they were also exercise jorts because he was lifting in them too. And that does not seem practical. Anything denim.
I'm picturing like Dennis from It's Always Sunny and he's like, I got so much flexibility. So much mobility.
Denim just doesn't seem to be anything that's practical for exercising or moving in any capacity.
Yeah. Very odd.
But I also say that as a woman who denim is not comfortable.
And then she steals that glass egg from him, and then he immediately leaves her alone again in his house, and then is like surprised that she's not there when he gets back, or.
And she's like, "Well, if I can just get my stuff back, or like my clothes back, I can get your egg." What? It didn't. It had the big pieces.
Horny high school guys also are not going to think their brain. They're going to think with their dick.
The story had the big pieces to it, but there was so much that just didn't really connect together for me. I don't know. It was weird, and it was like you said, it was slow. It was like there were times where it was hard to follow what was going on because it was just like, oh, he's back at high school again, just hanging out. I don't know. It was weird.
Well, then they get in this big fight with the whole like car going into the water thing. She storms off and like clearly would have heard him like yelling for help with the car and just walks away. Does not care that like the whole over exaggerated car he somehow can't like stop it from rolling down the hill. And then the very next thing he like takes like planes, trains, and automobiles across the city to go find her. Rose shows up all sweaty. No words they like make up. And there's like no like.
Yeah.
Very like not cohesive. Just it seemed like it was missing some sort of like believability and some storyline and some connecting.
I think that was just the biggest struggle for me with the whole movie was I just don't know how we're getting from this point to this point, and then that point to that point. It all didn't really connect together very well.
How long were his parents out of town? Because it seems like it took a long time for him to be like, oh, I'm just hanging out by myself. After the first night of one. Hooker, then the next thing I have another one, and then have time to build up this like
I think
huge,
the 2 hookers were in one night though.
Huge problem storyline. I don't know, it didn't seem like it. And then he has the whole buildup of this big enterprise. It seemed very rushed and very non-believable unless his parents were out of town for like 3 months, which I don't think so.
I mean, I think the most believable in the outlining circumstances of the movie would be a week. But I also just feel like as a parent, I would have a hard time leaving my high school child alone for a whole week. Yeah.
Especially with the whole like big Princeton looming thing, and then the guy comes in for the admissions and the parents aren't calling immediately like before or after that being like, are you prepared for this, or how did it go? They just kind of come up from their trip and they're like, oh, it apparently went really well.
All his parents are concerned with over the phone is, and our flight will get in on this day, and it's a United flight, blah, blah, blah. I mean, it's not at all like, oh, your Princeton interview, how did it go? They don't.
And like, how's he gonna track that? Is he gonna like call the airline every now and then to figure out if it's on schedule or
just Googling flight numbers? Interesting.
But the admissions guy totally would have called the cops right before walking in. Like he shows up there, clearly a whole bunch of like.
I thought he was a cop until they said who he was. I assumed he was a cop.
Yeah, like he walks in. Clearly, it's prostitution. If anything, like you're gonna see a bunch of like 14-year-olds there drinking and have like partying with the prostitutes. I don't think he would have been like, yeah, I'm gonna come down and sit down and interview this guy. But apparently he then books one of them.
Especially for someone from Princeton, it's not just like University of Illinois or whoever. Like just like
Talking Illini.
Whatever. I mean, that was his like backup school, but like it's not just like a like everyday college. I mean, it's like Princeton is not nothing. Yeah. And he comes in and is totally fine with Lana coming in trying to wheel a bed into that room because they needed the room, and just all like let my friend in. He needs to be home by midnight. If you were some kind of elite university admissions person, you would be very disturbed about everything you are witnessing.
Yeah, no way you would have like subjected yourself to okaying that. And
I mean, I know there are some bad people out there, but but it's not believable.
But I also wonder how like the University of Illinois felt being like kind of shit on there of like we're the backup school and we're like low class. Like it's not a crap university; it's a very good school. But I mean, obviously, like everyone views the Ivy League schools on a higher pedestal, but it still just seemed like he was like comparing like Princeton to like, well, I guess I'm going to community college and like really throwing it down there. Also, 0% chance this guy would have had a chance at Princeton in the first place. He had a 3.14 GPA, which obviously GPAs are all relative to the school there. But his class rank was 54. So unless he's at like a super high rated school, like I don't think that a 54 ranked person would have had a chance at Princeton. And an 1100 on the SAT, I don't remember what his exact scores were, but I think both were under 600.
It was around 1100. Yeah. And the fact that Wikipedia describes him as a high achieving student.
Yeah.
It seems like, I mean, I would not have said high achieving. I would have said he was someone who was working very hard to try to be...
middle of the pack.
Yes.
And obviously scores and numbers and all that sort of stuff has changed, but it still seems very impractical, even with the fact that he was a... what is it called when your parents were also went to the school? Legacy. There was a legacy at Princeton. Still seems unlikely that he would have had even a chance at an interview there.
But even his friend, like right off the bat, his friend who's smoking a cigar, playing poker or whatever with him, it's like, well, you're obviously getting into Harvard. And I was like, are you obviously getting into Harvard? I don't know.
Because he went to Future Enterprisers Club.
The friend wasn't in the Future Enterprisers Club. I don't know. That was not believable. I think the like overarching theme of all of this is I just don't feel like it was believable.
Yeah. And it wasn't believable, but I still feel like the same kind of movie would have been made today. Like I don't think it was something that couldn't have been made. It just equally would have been unbelievable.
And I do think that part of me needs to take a step back and be like, obviously all of these movies are movies. They are not documentaries. They are stories that are supposed to.
But at some point you can only suspend your belief, but so much. And the last thing I have is stealing the furniture, though. Where like the pimp, whatever, comes and gets out of town, or he's on the train, and he comes and steals all the furniture. I still feel like that very much didn't seem believable. Like the fact that he was like waving a gun around before, it would have been much more high stakes. He wouldn't have gotten out unscathed. That's why it seems like a high school fantasy.
The gun pull was like very casual, and then he didn't even actually use it. Not that I promote gun violence, but like if you're gonna pull the gun.
You never see it again, too. It's like
then you chase them all over. The car chase scene was like, and they just kept following each other.
And the guy shows up like at his house later, and Tom Cruise just kind of walks out and is like hanging out there. And,
aren't you concerned that he knows where you live now?
Yeah, and then he had a gun, and you're just like, I'm gonna walk out here in my jorts, and I'm totally going to like intimidate this guy. Like, no, it seemed kind of stupid there.
And how impractical! I'm gonna move all of the crap out of your parents' house. I mean. I know our parents, not that our parents are hoarders, but like you have a lot, like when you live in a home for a long time, you accumulate a lot of stuff.
That's fairly large, but moving out of my apartment, my God, it took forever to pack that shit up.
Right?
It would have, yeah.
Like, I'm going to take every piece of furniture out of their house. That's just not practical. No one actually wants to do that.
Just come and
that guy doesn't want to do that. He doesn't want to physically move to like
dining room tables. It'd be very pricey. You'd have had to pay a group of people to do that, and no way to get what his like $300 back per.
He made $8,000 that night. I'm pretty certain that guy got it all back. So as far as my notes go, a lot of them were just more like technological to start with. The audio, I think, especially compared to how things are nowadays, it's hard in scenes where there's a lot of background volume to like really hear what they're saying. And I feel like especially in the beginning, like were having their card game and they're all kind of talking over each other and they're moving the chips and there's lots of background noise I think now there's a lot more like either like a very much more discreet hidden lapel mic or the boom mics are a lot more sensitive to the actual like volume of the voices that I had a hard time tracking what they were saying and trying to follow.
Part of that might just be our audio system, the fact that we have like a thin TV doing that. But I also think
but I noticed it in The Graduate too, that it was like it seemed more like the older movies. I have a harder time hearing what they're saying because it gets muffled in with the background.
I think it definitely was much more of like a boom mic with the actors projecting more versus nowadays they've got the smaller mics so they talk more quietly. I thought it for the most part was fairly easy to understand what they were saying. It
was more at the beginning where I had a harder time like actually hearing what they were saying. But I also noticed it in The Graduate too of like if they were at the party scene at the beginning of The Graduate that it was harder to pick out what people were saying because there was a lot more background noise and those like bigger background scenes were harder to follow. Also, I wanted to talk really quickly about the like follow point of view shot at the beginning where he is at home and you don't see Tom Cruise at all, but it's like you see his mom and then his dad's like, come with me, is this where I left my stereo system? And he follows the dad in there and then he's at the airport and he follows them in the car and up the escalator. And it was like minutes without seeing Tom Cruise, but it felt like it was
in all those
you're looking technology.
At the parents are gonna make them seem like larger, like you are a kid looking up to them and
I think that was mostly on the escalator though. He was behind.
They also had those shots of like looking at like the kid photos to kind of portray like you are a kid looking up at your parents, and I think they were really trying to lean into that. And I think that's why they had the escalator shot was to really hammer that home. But for the most part, it was like the parents are the ones that are like talking down to you, and they're the ones in control and telling you all those things.
Yeah, but it also felt like this is a new kind of technology. We have these steady cams that we can follow somebody, and it looks like it's your point of view, and I was wondering if stood out a lot.
If we were gonna get more of like the opposite at the end when like Tom Cruise had like become a man and was now
that would have been very interesting
and had like I didn't notice if they did that and any like reverse shots of that or if they made any point to have the opposite. It almost seemed like a half-baked idea that they never really followed through on. But I agree, it was very noticeable that like super forced point of view artistic thing of following,
and it was not so noticeable for the first like 30 seconds, and then it kept going and it kept going and it kept going, and then that was the only time that was done in the whole movie that it felt it really stood out to me. And then I also made a note that when Tom Cruise was at the diner with his friends in the beginning and they were like talking about he's obviously going to go to Harvard and we're going to do this blah blah blah, and they said that if you leave straight out of Harvard with an MBA you'll make $40,000 and dermatologists would make $60,000, and just I feel like that really sets it apart from where we are in the 2020s now.
Yeah, when you're looking at it and you're like, that's just slightly above minimum wage.
I mean, I started out as a elementary school teacher making $40,000.
Making more than that.
Making more than $40,000.
$50,000.
That those numbers just were kind of jarring to hear given what today's society is. And then I also had a note that he was drinking a lot of beer and they were drinking beer. Obviously high schoolers drink beer.
So yeah, he had a whole he had a display of like beers in his drunk
room.
Beer cans in his
and
room.
the national, then that got me thinking, like, was the drinking age 21 then? Like, when did it actually switch? Because I know like it was 18 for when my parents were in.
At 18, I think it was liquor at 21.
And the National Drinking Age Act to make it 21 was passed in 1984. So it was a year after this. So although it looked from the maps, the quick Wikipedia article I skimmed while we were watching this made it look like Illinois would have probably not been in the 18 age in 1983. It still was interesting that this was made in a time when people in America could buy some kind of alcohol at 18.
Because it seemed like
and I don't know what made me think about
the whole big glass of scotch thing was like I've never drank before, I don't understand alcohol, but he pours this huge glass full of it. that it seems even more weird being like, he could have likely bought beer at that age, but not liquor. You still would understand like how much is too much if you've been drinking with your friends and that was all acceptable. And why he would feel the need to be like, I'm going to pour this huge glass.
I mean, unless he's a high school 18-year-old and he's like, oh, I have a beer that's
12
this
ounces,
much.
I'll 12 ounces
that,
of liquor.
like, I'll pour the liquor that you just don't really think twice about it. And then just like a fun note of when he is like when Jackie, the first prostitute, shows up and he's like going to call his friend and he throws the antenna on the phone up and he puts it to his ear, and I just feel like that's something that like I don't think I ever did with any of our phones. I don't think we had maybe we had one with an antenna that
We definitely did, but I think I didn't really use the phone that much while we had phones.
It was not something that was like, oh, this will change how my phone works when I use it. That I thought that was just very entertaining. That he throws the antenna, but I feel like that's very similar to the like, I'm gonna slam my flip phone shut. Just the aggressive phone gestures that I feel like is much less now when you can just tap your phone with your thumb is way less aggressive than let me slap my flip phone shut or I'm gonna push my antenna down. It just, that made me giggle. And then my last night was just like, WTF. This whole movie, it was just not at all what I was expecting it to be.
I mean, same thing with the Graduate, of not what I was expecting, but I
also feel like that's kind of almost what makes these even better is like, I've heard of it my whole life and it's just completely different. Totally different.
I don't really know, and I wish I'd talked more before the movie about what I expected. I think we should have some more like predictions about like what we think the plot line's going to be before we start.
Because clearly we need to give more predictions because we are completely blown away every time.
Just how far away we were. Because I said something in the before it about there being a party, and there kind of was with the whole like prostitution party and what I remembered. And I remembered something about with the car getting pushed into the water. So as soon as they arrived at the ice cream thing, I remembered that. But yeah, it was not what I remembered. But again, the title fits. No real complaints there.
Do you feel cultured? I think we might have already answered that, but just to kind of wrap it up, like, we've been cultured for sure.
Definitely glad I saw it. I think it was not necessarily like symbolic of the times, but it feels like a piece of that times, and it's also cool seeing like a very early Tom Cruise film. Because I imagine we'll see him in a lot more of our movies. And
2 points. I think back to the Tom Cruise thing, we know him as what he is now. I think he's like 60 now, of where he is in the like 2000s. That to see him in his early days was kind of nice and like refreshing compared to like what he's known for now. But I'm really excited now to see this movie referenced and actually understand it. I mean, similarly with The Graduate, and just having so much more of an understanding of what it is. And I feel like there's something. I feel like there is some movie or TV show that references that Risky Business egg, and I can't put my finger on it. And I don't know if it was like a Disney something, but I feel like Disney would not do that. But it feels like that kind of movie where it was like, I have this memorabilia of the egg from Risky Business, and I can't put my finger on what it's from, and I hope that I'm able to like figure it out. Because as soon as I saw the egg, I was like, oh, maybe that's something that I've heard of before.
Because everything I've seen about this movie has just been like the underwear scene and the.
And that's where I started going into it.
Records off the shelf.
Yeah. That I feel like I need to go rewatch everything I've ever watched prior to now so that I can figure out what that's from. But I'm excited to see how many times we see this referenced in the future.
Yeah.
But it was a good one. I feel like
cultured.
I feel cultured after that one. Like that one was a good one that like obviously I'm shocked by it, but I'm ready to.
I feel much more so than Never Been Kissed, but then again, this was a more popular movie, but I feel like it was better of a watch, and I feel more fulfilled after seeing that one than I did in the last week. Yeah,
it was really good. And I'm excited to like sit in that for a week or so. Because I feel like every week we watch our movie and I think about it a lot. Like, oh, that's not what I thought, or it's what I thought, or I'm interested, or I understand this better now that I'm excited to just kind of sit in this for a couple days and kind of see how I feel in a couple days. But yes, very good. Episode 3.
Done. Cheers.